Landscape of the Soul by Nathalie Trouveroy. Wonderful is told about a painter, Wu Doiji, who lived in the 8th century. His last painting was a landscape commissioned by the Tang Emperor Zhongzong to decorate a palace wall. So, this painter was sponsored by the emperor and asked to make a painting that was to decorate the palace wall. The master had hidden his work behind a screen, so only the emperor would see it. For a long while, the emperor admired the wonderful scene, discovering forests, high mountains, waterfalls, clouds floating in an immense sky, men on hilly paths, birds in flight. Look, sire, said the painter. In this cave, at the foot of the mountain, dwells a spirit. The painter clapped his hand, and the entrance of the cave opened. The inside is splendid beyond anything words can convey. Please let me show your majesty the way. The painter entered the cave, but the entrance closed behind him, and before the astonished emperor could move or utter a word, the painting had vanished from the wall. Not a trace of Wu Doiji's brush was left, and the artist was never seen again in this world. Such stories played an important part in Chinese classical education. The books of Confucius and Zheng are full of them. They help the masters to guide his disciple in the right direction. Beyond the anecdote, now the anecdote that we have read, the story that we have read, we are not sure whether it is a real story, but generally a story from real life. So here, beyond the anecdote, they are deeply revealing of the spirit in which art was considered. Now this tells us how art was considered in those days in China. Contrast this story or another famous one about a painter who wouldn't draw the eye of a dragon he had painted. An old story from my native Flanders that I find most representative of Western painting. Now here is a contrasting story where the painter does not draw the eye of the dragon, thinking that if he would draw, then it would become so real that it would fly away from the painting. In 15th century Antwerp, a master blacksmith called Quentin Metzes fell in love with a painter's daughter. In 15th century Antwerp, he was a master blacksmith. His name was, say, Quentin Metzes. He fell in love with a painter's daughter. The father would not accept a son-in-law in such a profession of like the blacksmith. So Quentin sneaked into the painter's studio and painted a fly on his latest panel. What did this Quentin Mitchell do to the painter studio, and he drew a fly on the latest panel with such delicate realism that the master tried to sweat it away from before he realized what had happened. When the master came and he saw the fly on the panel, it looked so realistic that he tried to say drive it away from there, sweat it away from there, and then he realized that it was a painted fly. Quentin was immediately admitted as an apprentice into his studio. After that, he was taken as an apprentice by the girl's father. He married his beloved and went on to become one of the most famous painters of his age. These two stories illustrate what each form of art is trying to achieve: a perfect illusionistic likeness in Europe, the essence of inner life and spirit in Asia. In Europe, what does the painting look for? It looks for the essence of inner life. And in Asia, what does it look for? The spirit. And what spirit are illusionistic likeness? It is not a real likeness, but it is so illusionary that it looks to be real. In the Chinese story, the emperor commissions a painting and appreciates its outer appearance. Now, in fact, the outer appearance, the mountains and the forest that the emperor was not the real painting, but the artist reveals to him the true meaning of his work by going to the cave. The emperor may rule over the territory he has conquered, but only the artist knows the way within. Now, he knew the way within the cave as the painting vanished. Let me show the way. The Tao, a word that means both the path or the method, and the mysterious works of the universe. The painting is gone, but the artist has reached his goal beyond any material appearance. A classical Chinese landscape is not meant to reproduce an actual view. The classical Chinese landscape, when it is drawn, it is not meant to reproduce any actual view. Whereas, in the as would a Western figurative painting, in the Western figurative painting, it would try to reproduce the actual view. Whereas a European painter wants you to borrow his eyes and look at the particular landscape exactly as he saw it from a specific angle. The European or the European painter, what does he want to do? He wants you to look at the painting from his point of view. And the Chinese painter does not choose a single viewpoint. He does not decide from which point of view the painting should be looked at. His landscape is not a real one. The landscape drawn by the Chinese painter is not the real one. And you can enter it from any point. Then travel in it. The artist creates a path for your eyes to travel up and down, then back again in a leisurely movement. This is what the Chinese painter would create. This is even more true in the case of the horizontal scroll, in which the action of slowly opening one section of the painting, then rolling it up to move on to the other, adds a dimension of time which is unknown in any other form of painting. This is yet another kind of a painting where that is of horizontal scroll. You just scroll the painting and it seems as if some action is going on. It appears to be like a movie. This is even more true in the case of the horror, in which the action of slowly opening one section of the painting, then rolling it up to move to the other, adds a dimension of time. It seems as if it is really moving, which is unknown in any other form of painting. It also requires the active participation of the viewer. The viewer has to actively participate to see that. Who decides at what pace he will travel through the painting? How fast he wants to travel through the painting, that fast he will have to scroll horizontally. A participation which is physical as well as mental. The Chinese painter does not want you to borrow his eyes, he wants you to enter his mind. The Chinese painter wants you to look at the painting from his point of view and he wants to share his mind with you, not his eyes. The landscape is an inner one because you can see the inner landscape only with your mind. A spiritual and a conceptual space. Conceptual space is a conceptual means this concept is expressed in Shan Shui, literally mountain water, which used together represent the word landscape. More than two elements of an image, these represents two complementary poles reflecting the Taoist view and of the universe. There are two contrasting complementary poles which show the Taoist or the method or the path uh, that is to be from the point of view it has to be looked. The mountain reaching vertically towards heaven, stable, warm, and dry in the sun, while the water is yin, horizontal and resting on the earth, fluid, moist, and cool. The interaction of the yin, the receptive, feminine aspect of universal energy, and its counterpart masculine, is of course a fundamental notion of Taoism. Now, Taoism talks about mountain and water. These are the two contrasting elements, and what is so contrasting about the mountain and the water that is talked about? What is often overlooked is an essential third element, the middle void where interaction takes place. The interaction between the mountain and the water, wherever it takes place, that is the this is of pranayam. Breathe in, retain, breathe out. The suspension of breath is the void which meditation where meditation occurs. When this kind of a thing is created in painting, that makes you meditate. The middle void is essential. Nothing can happen without that middle void between the mountain and the earth. Hence, the importance of the white, unpainted space in Chinese landscape. In Chinese landscape, there is an unpainted space. That is the void. That is the suspension breath which causes the meditation. This is also where man finds a fundamental role. In that space between heaven and earth, it becomes the conduit of communication between both poles of the universe. His presence is essential even if it's only suggested. Far from being lost or oppressed by the lofty peaks, you should not get lost in the or oppressed by the lofty peaks. He is the Francis Chang's wonderful expression, the eye of the landscape. This is an excerpt from Landscape of the Soul, Ethics and Spirituality in Chinese Painting. Some of the things have been edited over here. Getting inside, outside, getting inside, outsider art. Now, this is the last part of the lesson, which is more of informative. When French painter Jean Duffet, sorry, Buffet mooted the concept of art brut in the 1940s, the art of the untrained visionary was a minority interest. Means less people were interested in it when it was basically painted. From its almost veiled beginnings, outsider art has gradually become the fastest growing area of interest in the commonly accepted contemporary art. This genre is described as art of those who have no right to be artists as they have received no formal training. This genre of painting is for those people who have not been trained as an artist, yet show talent and artistic insight. Their works are a stimulating contrast to a lot of mainstream offerings, the mainstream paintings that are there. In contrast to that, these works of the untrained artists are very stimulating. Around the time Dubuffet was propounding his concept in India, an untutored genius was creating paradise. Years ago, the little patch of jungle which he began clearing to make himself a garden sculpted with stone and recycled material is known to the world today as the Rock Garden at Chandigarh. With the help of that said is on that concept this Rock Garden of Chandigarh is made. Nek Chen is now hailed as India's biggest contributor to outsider art. The 50th issue, spring 2005, of Raw Vision in a UK based magazine pioneered in outsider art publication features Nek Chen and his rock gardens sculpture Woman by the Waterfall on its anniversary issues cover. It was given so much importance that the in the magazine it was put on the cover page. The notion of art brut and raw art was of works that were in their raw state as regard cultural and artistic influence. As far as the culture and the artistic influence is concerned, these two works were raw, means they were not so sophisticated or something that had hailed much of attention. Anything and everything from a tin to a sink of a broken down car could be material for a work of art. Something Nek Chand has taken to dizzying heights, recognizing his art as an outstanding testimony of the difference a single man can make when he lives his dream. The Swiss Commission for UNESCO will be honoring him by way of a European exposition of his works. The 5-month interactive show Realm of Nek Chand, beginning October, will be held at leading museums in Switzerland, Belgium, France, and Italy. The biggest reward is walking through the garden and seeing people enjoy my creation, Nek Chand says. Now, this is all about the lesson. Now, Landscape of the Soul, as we read it, it seems to be a lesson which needs a kind of explanation in general. So, let me explain to you in brief as to which are the concepts that are taken in this lesson. In the excerpt from The Landscape of the Soul, Ethics and Spirituality in Chinese Painting, the writer tells us that Chinese art is focused on bringing about the essence of inner life and spirit. A viewer can often travel through the painting and reach the dimension beyond time. A Chinese painter wants one to enter his mind. The landscape in Chinese art is an inner one, and a spiritual and a conceptual space. A Chinese painting is not a real one, and a Chinese painter doesn't choose a single viewpoint. His is a now a landscape for his palace wall by the Tang Emperor Zhang. The painter had hidden his work behind a screen so that only the emperor could see it. He told the emperor that a spirit dwelled in the cave at the foot of the painted mountain. The painter clapped his hands, the cave door opened, and the painter entered the door. But before the astonished emperor could move or utter a word, the painter and his painting both vanished forever. In another example, a painter wouldn't draw the eye of a dragon he had painted as he feared it would fly out of the painting once he completed it. In contrast to Chinese painting, European art is a real one. It aims to create perfect resemblance with the original object. The painter aims to reproduce an actual view for the viewer. A European painter wants his viewer to view the painting with the same perspective as that of his own. Another example of the Western type of painting was given, which dated back to the 15th century Antwerp, where a blacksmith fell in love with a painter's daughter and convinced her father for their alliance by showing his realistic painting skill. He painted a fly with such delicate realism that the blacksmith tried to sweat the fly away and was deceived. The writer compared the two distinct painting styles by the result both expected to achieve out of their work: a perfect illusionistic likeness in Europe and the essence of inner life and spirit in Asia was the aim of the two distinctive styles of painting. The concept shan shui means the literal meaning is mountain water. These two elements together depict the Taoist view of the universe. This element is active and masculine. It reaches vertically towards heaven, that is sky. It remains stable, warm, and dry. The water is yin. This element is horizontal and resting on earth, cool, moist, and fluid. The interaction of the receptive feminine aspect of universal yin and the masculine aspect yang is the fundamental notion of Taoism. There is also a third element, the middle void, where interaction of yang and yin takes place. Without this element, nothing can happen. It represents the white unpainted space in Chinese landscape. And the last part of it is the concept of outsider art or art brut was suggested by French artist Jean uh, Dubuffet in 1940s. Outsider art is the artwork usually done by untrained or naive artists. Outsider art or art brut is a genre of work described as the art of those who have no right to be artists as they have not received any formal training yet they show talent and have artistic insight. The artwork are stimulating contrast to a lot of mainstream of works that are state with regard to aspects. The writer refers to an 80 years old created director, Mr. Nak Chen. This artist sculpted a paradise out of stones and recycled material. He created the famous rock garden in Chandigarh. Being an outsider artist, he is referred to as an untutored genius. Anything and everything from a tent to a sink to a broken down car was used by Nek Chen to create the rock garden. His rock garden sculpture, Woman by the Waterfall, is a masterpiece among the that has grabbed the attention of thousands. The UK based magazine Raw Vision has featured Nek Chen and his rock garden sculpture, Woman by a Waterfall, on its anniversary issue cover page. This is, in short, the whole lesson. You may listen to the last part from 16 minutes to 23. That will give you an idea about the lesson. Thank you.